Okay, welcome everyone. This is our webinar on how to improve forecasting for fun and profit. In the last webinar, I think we had a question, what is the reason for forecasting? And there's a multiple choice question. It was actually using this WooClap system that you see on the screen here, and we're going to use it again to allow you to vote. But one of those, in fact, the answer you had, Nicola, wasn't on the multiple choice, was it? We asked the question, why do you forecast? Then there was like,
I had my secret. I had my personal
secret
secret answer, which is I do that for fun, but
yeah,
it's a very personal one.
So we built that into the title of the webinar. Anyway, welcome everyone. Thanks very much for joining. We are about to start on how to improve forecasting for fun and profit. I see loads of people saying hello in the chat. Thanks very much for that. It's great to have an engaging session, and please feel free to make sure your questions get put into the chat, the Q&A. We've got about 40 minutes of content, and then we will get to the questions. So as they occur, please put them down. And I think we're good to start, right?
Great. Maybe I will just reshare in the conversation the link to this WooClap. Let me try to do that so everyone can connect to WooClap as we start. Great. And I see we already have 30 people connected. So if you're new to this webinar and to the webinar I often do and I do now with Kien, I'm using WooClap to ask questions to the audience. It's for free. You don't even need to make an account to participate. You just need to click on this link, and we will ask you a few questions during the webinar so we can exchange on some ideas with everyone here. Maybe as we start, let us maybe just quickly introduce ourselves. So first, maybe as for those of you who do not know me, I really honestly just like to present myself as someone who's genuinely passionate about demand forecasting and inventory optimization. I only work on these two subjects for years. I spend my time nearly as a hobby of teaching that at university, mostly in Paris, also in Brussels. I wrote a book about the subject, so if you're interested to learn more about forecasting and inventory, you can always check these two books. I also work as a consultant. I coach companies, I create models for companies, and I'm the co-founder of a forecasting platform online called Skus. And so some of my clients, as you can see, it's mostly big international companies that I'm helping with their process or models. And now we have Kien, of course.
Okay, hello everyone. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Kien Leong. And in contrast to Nicola, who is very clear and focused on what he does with demand forecasting and inventory optimization, so Kien's speciality, I tend to have a bit of a broader scope and don't go as deep into any one area. So my professional area is management consultancy for operations management and supply chain planning. In practice, that means helping manufacturing companies improve operational performance. And I got quite a broad range of sectors. Most recently, a lot of work in life sciences, particularly biopharmaceutical manufacturing. Also doing a fair amount of work within industrial manufacturing and consumer goods. So this webinar is a bit of a collaboration between some of the techniques that I've been offering for a while on a website called productionscheduling.com. So we take Excel tools and a methodology for developing planning tools in Excel and share various different ideas for a range of different planning, all the way from demand planning and forecasting, right the way through to purchasing and procurement, capacity, production scheduling, everything in between. So this is, second in a series of webinars where we are putting together some joint material between Nicola and I. Again, here's a client list. You'll see some of the companies that you recognize. When we're working with Excel solutions, it actually goes right the way across the size of organizations. So right the way from the large multinationals that you see down to much smaller companies as well. And I think it's fair to say that people are using Excel tools in combination with their enterprise systems, no matter what that system is, whether it's a global SAP implementation or a small Sage or QuickBooks type system. So what we have to offer should be, we aim for it to be applicable to any size of organization. Just because we have a lot of multinational companies on this logo list doesn't mean that it's all for companies with tens of thousands of people and billions of dollars. So we want to make this accessible, and that's one of the reasons why I'm going to be sharing the Excel tool that we have to be able to bring some of those techniques to everybody without having to invest in a lot of software.
Perfect. Let's maybe start with the webinar and the content today. So when we finished the webinar 2 weeks ago, we discussed the forecasting process. We discussed how it integrates with the rest of the supply chain, why it is important, and all the building block of this process. One of the building block that we wanted to really discuss today was this first block of creating a forecast baseline. Let me just try to define this in a few sentences so it's super clear for everyone what we are talking about. So when you have your demand planning, demand forecasting process, whatever the name is, the first step should be, let's create an automated good quality forecast baseline, and then let's review it with demand planners, sales, marketing, whoever wants to touch it. But first, let's create an automated forecast so we do not have manually each and every one of us to type values for all the product every month. No, you want to have a model that can generate this baseline for you, and the better the baseline is, the less time you need to edit this forecast, right? So creating a good forecast baseline using the appropriate forecast engine, it's very important. This will allow you to reduce your workload and improve your forecasting quality. So when we discuss forecasting baseline, obviously most of the model rely on, wait, I have a question for you. Let's maybe start with this question before I move to WooClap. Let me remind you to, let me go back to this slide. Let me remind you to click on the link here, WooClap/IP0. I don't know how you would pronounce that. So you just need to go to this link on your web browser, and this will allow me to interact with you. You will be able to answer the question. I will again copy paste this link directly in the discussion. So you can just click on it. It's for free. You don't even need to make an account. So just click on it and you will see the question and we can interact. Okay. Let me then move on to the first question I have for you. So this, talking about this baseline, the first question I have for you is, do you have a forecast baseline? What kind of forecast baseline do you use every month? Do you have a software that generates this forecast for you? Do you have an homemade solution in Excel? Do you just copy paste the budget? Or maybe you have no baseline at all, and every month you start from a blank page and you have to type the forecast yourself. It's a multiple choice question. So I see some of you are saying, well, I use demand driver. That's amazing. You can click on multiple solutions saying, well, I use machine learning and demand driver, or I use, I don't know, my homemade solution in Excel and demand driver. Okay, great. I see that we have 58 people online answering this question. That's so great. And I see that we have a lot of homemade solution today. And unfortunately for 7 of you, it seems to be very manual. We have a lot of copy paste from budget. That is not such a good practice. So I hope that we will find new solution for you on how to move forward with this. I only see one of you saying, well, I use machine learning. Okay. It seems that using machine learning is still today very, very advanced topic. I'm glad that I can participate in this kind of provocation. There are 2 people now, great. And I see only one of you is saying, well, I use demand drivers as promotion pricing to enrich my forecast. Again, automatically. So it means that your forecast baseline by default does that. Okay, that's very interesting. So I see a lot of homemade solution, a lot of software, and I see, unfortunately, some of you manual. It's nearly 1/3, 1/3, 1/3. Let me move on with this. So if you want to create a statistical baseline, so if you want to use a forecast engine that's going to generate a forecast for you automatically every week, every month, most of the time it's going to do something called time series forecasting. Time series forecasting, it's really I would say the most basic model that say, look at what was demand like in the last 12, 24, 36 or 5 years, 36 months or 5 years. These models are going to capture demand, the level, the trends, a seasonality, if any, and they're going to project that in the future. So these models somehow are looking at what happened in the past. Do I see seasonality? Do I see a trend? And they're going to project that in the future. Okay. These models are very interesting and very powerful. Why? Because they do not require so much data to run. They are very simple to understand and simple to run. And I think that's a great thing, because it means that anyone listening to us right now, you can basically, there is a 99% probability that these kind of models are going to work for you. And I think it's a great thing that we have a class of model that we can safely assume this is going to work. Like, it's not going to get anything crazy. It's going to give you some relevant forecast. Let me just show you an example. If you read my book, it's the same example as from the book. I took the sales of BMW in Norway, and you can see them. These are the real data from 2007 to 2017. And you see the sales here in blue. And when you use such a model to predict the future sales of BMW, the model is going to tell you, well, I see a trend, I see an average demand level. And when I'm going to do this forecast in the future, I'm going to project this trend and project the trend and the level going forward. And you see here that if you look at this orange line here, the model understands that there is a trend and the model is projecting this trend. Actually, what's even more interesting here is that you can read the trend of the model, and you see that, well, the model sees here that there is a trend of plus 16 cars per month right now. So there is a very high trend going on, and the model could learn that on its own. So it's very interesting. It's simple to understand. You can, how to say that, you can open the box and see what's inside this model to understand any future forecast. Now there is another type of model that's very sexy, very attractive. I've seen a lot of consultancy companies, software company proposing this kind of model to see people, and it's very sexy. So people are very attracted to that. Let me try to explain you the pro and con of that. So we have here predictive analytics. The idea here is to look at what are the drivers, what are the things that are influencing driving demand, right? Do you do promotion? That would impact demand. What about macroeconomics? This also could impact demand. What about the weather, holidays, things like that? So these type of models are going to look at all these things that are external to demand, promotion, pricing, marketing, budget, all these kind of things. These models will try to understand the impact of all these things on demand and then give you a future forecast, obviously, assuming that you're going to do or not do some promotion, that you're going to change pricing, that maybe marketing is going to change and so on. Usually, again, when we describe these kind of models to management, they love this because it sounds so forward-looking. It's not backward-looking as the time series we just saw. It's really forward-looking of, are you going to do a promotion in the future? We're going to change the forecast. It's something that's very appealing to forecaster. Unfortunately, in practice, setting up these models can be very challenging. First, because the models are more complicated, and more complicated means more difficult to set up, but also because you need more data. A lot of people might be thinking right now, wow, this sounds great. I do promotion. I should include that in my model. Then the question I have for you is, do you have data that would show me the promotion you did over the last 5 years per product, per market? That's not sure. So of course, if you don't have the data, you cannot use such kind of model. Let me show you an example on how this could work. So here's on the right side of the slide, you can see a graph that's basically adapted from one of the projects I did last year. So you see the sales is rather low. And then when you have a promotion, you have a very weird double peak or single peak of demand. And what's really great is that as soon as you get a model that's able to replicate these peaks in the future, you can really start doing what I would call real demand planning. You can decide to do or not to do a promotion in the future, and your baseline forecast is going to directly show you the uplift of doing this promotion and the impact on whole your forecasting planning. So that's so great. But then the issue, let me click here. The issue is that it's very difficult to model. You can have a rebound, you can have lower sales just after a promotion. You can have people stopping to buy because they know you're going to have to do a promotion in the future. For example, me, when I know that Black Friday will be in 4 weeks, I will just stop buying things and just wait for Black Friday, right? So a promotion is not because you do a promotion on week 10 that it only impacts week 10. You also have an impact on week, 8, 9, 11, and 12. What's also difficult is the lack of data. If you think about Black Friday, it only happens once a year. So it's difficult for a model to understand exactly the impact of that. Okay, so new question for you on WooClap, and I see we nearly have now 80 people connected there, is what kind of demand driver do you use directly in your model? Just stay with me here. I'm not asking what kind of demand driver you use as a human when you review your forecast. I'm really asking your model, the model you use right now automated, does it use any kind of driver? If you use SAP APO, does SAP APO use promotion and pricing to make a forecast? If you use any kind of online tool, does it use any of that? If you use machine learning, does it do that, right? So it's really a question of, did you automate any of that? Because I know that a lot of planning process, well, they use this data at some point and people review the forecast because they know, well, we're going to do a promotion, I'm going to change the forecast. But the question here really is, did you automate any of that? And I see that for nearly 90% of you, the answer is no, it's not automated. We need to do that manually. And it's very interesting that here we have a few of you who say, well, our model understands the concept of a shortage, and the model we use can, I don't know, take shortages into account to update the forecast. That's so great. I think I'm going to organize a webinar just on shortages in the future. It's interesting also to see that a lot of, among the people who say, well, I'm using something, promotion is there. I think it's very relevant for a lot of companies. Sales are very promotion driven, but it's also something that we can easily capture in a data set, like the promotion we did in the past and the promotion we plan for the future. So if you have a supply chain that I would call promotion driven, using promotion in your model is something that's very important. On the other hand, pricing, it's slightly more difficult to take into account because prices, if you're in B2B, might change from one client to another because you give some discounts. In B2C, it's also kind of tricky because in a lot of stores, people do not experiment with pricing. It would be very weird. Like, for example, if you used to buy a sandwich at lunch, it would be very weird that every day the price of your sandwich is like 5 or 10 cents different. It would make it weird. So we do not really know, or model couldn't really get the idea of how pricing is impacting demand. And only one of you is using macroeconomics. Using macroeconomics in forecasting is especially difficult. Okay, let's maybe move ahead with this. Again, if you want to answer this question, you can just click on the link here. I mean, type it in your browser. It's wooclap.com/IP0. You don't need to register to that. It's for free. You can just click there and then you can straight away answer any question. Kien, I think it's your turn to present the tool. Yes, maybe you will share your screen?
Can do, yeah. So here is screen 2. Right. Okay, so we're going to switch in and out of 2 modes of discussion. Right? Nicolas is going to take the concept and the theory behind the approach of forecasting. What I have to talk about is a little bit more tactical because it relates to the tool that we're going to share after this webinar. As Nicolas was talking, I was thinking about that classic diagram that consultants really love, the 2x2 matrix. So you've got maybe one dimension is the complexity of your forecasting, you know, which variables you're taking into account. Is it just historical or future? How many drivers, that sort of thing. And then the other one is how automated is the process, from very manual to automated. And I would imagine that a lot of people are already taking the manual and simple to complex approach. That is typically pretty much covered with a lot of what you would already be doing. So what we want to do is start with an automated solution and start simple. So we're going to be starting in the automated but simple corner to be able to start generating that baseline across all of the products and then be able to do some measurements and move up the complexity curve. So to start off with, I'd like to characterize the tool that we will share like a black box. And you've probably heard the term black box before. It's usually referred to as some kind of function where we feed information in one side and we get information out the other. And inside the black box, some logic is performed. We don't really know what's happening in there, but we trust it to do the job that we want it to do. And I think that way of thinking about things, input, process, output, is very helpful, particularly when we're thinking about how forecasting fits into a much wider process. But what I'm suggesting is that that's not enough. You know, a lot of us have systems that perform a type of black box function, whether it be MRP, advanced planning and scheduling, or anything else. In many cases, the answer isn't trusted because the people who use it don't know exactly how the computer has got to the result that it's come up with. So I'm going to propose that we take the same approach of looking at inputs, process, and outputs, but we go one step further. We open up that black box and we have a look a little bit at the logic and concept inside. Now, I've pre-built this tool, so you won't need to go down to the detailed formula. I've just given you one example. That's not even one of the more complex formulas that are in here. Don't worry about understanding any of that, right? The Excel skills that you'll need to operate this tool are quite straightforward. What's more important is that we understand what inputs need to be put in. We understand from a conceptual level some of the logic that's happening. That's what this webinar is about. And then we understand to read the outputs and to be able to take decisions from there. So in that spirit, I want to spend a couple of minutes talking about two different approaches in using spreadsheets in business. Now, I think half of this audience will have seen some of the content that we have at productionscheduling.com, and these ideas might be somewhat familiar. The other half is probably new to what I've got to say, so this might be a handy orientation on some of the methods that we have. So over on the left-hand side, we've got a typical way that people interact with spreadsheets, and it's pretty much not quite universal, but I find it in almost every company you go in because it's very intuitive. We've got a system, some kind of system that with a database that carries data. That data is usually transactional data. So in our case, we're looking at historical sales records. We want to pull that data out because we want to do something that the system doesn't do or doesn't like us to do. So we pull that information out into a spreadsheet, and now we can see it. We can see that data. We can start to move it around and arrange it according to the way we'd like to visualize the results. And it's very common to get spreadsheets like the one on the left-hand side there. We've got part numbers down the rows on one side. We've got time increments going across in columns. We've got some volume in the middle, and we've also got some summary data. We've got some dates and weekly periods and so forth. Lots of information mixed together on the same sheet. Now, it represents the way you'd like to see it, but it has some limitations in the way that we manage that information, because very often people aren't just reading this information, they're also writing. They're making changes to the content. They're making decisions and then documenting those decisions in the spreadsheet itself by changing some of the numbers. So now we've got a spreadsheet that mixes together system data, manually updated data, formats, reports, and all together in the same workbook. And then that gets sent to a number of different people. And before you know it, you start to understand why IT have a problem with this term of spread marks, where we're sending multiple versions of data, some of it mirroring or a copy of what sits in the system, some of it based on tacit information or interpretation from people. So we've got two main problems. We've got the problem of replicated data and spread marks, and we've also got the problem of this process being quite repetitive and needing to be done every planning cycle. So I'm going to show you an alternative. This isn't a sales pitch, because it's a methodology that we teach and share through a number of the tools that we give away. And quite simply, it's using Excel in a different way. So instead of following our intuition and taking the data and arranging it in a matrix or some kind of report, we want to separate out that into 3 sections: data, calculations, and reporting. The workbook for forecasting is an example of this. So the very first thing we want to do is get the data that we need to use. In this case, it's really simple because it's just one table. It's a sales history at a weekly or a monthly level, right? So we've got one table that's coming from directly from this host system. We either connect directly to it using a database connection, or we can get that information out, but in a table form, in a text file format. And that's the version that we've set up in the tool for you to use. Because it's the simplest version and we don't have to worry about how your system is going to give us access to the data, because everybody can get something out in a CSV or top text file format. And then within the tool, we separate out the data in tables. We do a number of calculations on a number of sheets, and we come out with a report. Okay, so first of all, this means we have a single source of truth. We don't have to worry about replicating your sales history and retyping it into another spreadsheet. It's using live system data. So when you update, as long as you have that data connection, you're working with the very latest information and updating your forecast according to what's fresh. Secondly, it means that we can create an automated routine where that taking the data, performing calculations, generating a report is fully automated. So literally at the click of a button, you're able to generate forecasts for all of your items and then measure them in one click, rather than performing a mixture of manual judgment and data preparation tasks within that forecasting cycle. So a lot of our tools, in fact, everything that we share within this methodology, the Fast Excel method, uses this structure. Bring in the data in tables, just the same way as a software system would. Perform a number of calculations, also in tables, means we can be very quick, and then produce the report. And that report data can be shared to multiple users, and everybody's looking at the same thing. So I'm giving you that as a bit of a context to the structure of the tool itself. So here's how the forecasting tool works. Your inputs are data, top left-hand corner of the screen here. As I say, one table that represents a demand history. So we've got some kind of ID for the item, a product code. We have an interval. In this example, it's a week, or you could supply a month. But it's an interval of demand, and then we have a quantity. And this is one big long table, 3 columns, and in this example, 1,600 rows of data, because we've got 10 products, 2.5 years of history at the weekly level. So quite a lot of data. We're then converting that into daily demand. Now, why would you take weekly demand, convert it into daily demand? Most people don't forecast daily. It's simply because we can take your inputs at a monthly or weekly level, and then we convert it to daily, bring it back to weekly or monthly, and it means that we have an easy conversion between months and weeks. Of course, it is a little trickier than just dividing by 4 point something, because of course not very few months have whole numbers of weeks inside them. So very often we're splitting a week into 1 month or another. So that's the calculations. Now, I've shown you these screenshots as an example. You don't need to worry about what's going on in these sheets. You see one of them has 10,990 records as we get the demand down to the daily level. This is just to give you an idea of what's going on in the tool. The reports are the key output, and we're going to spend the rest of the time looking at those. So we've got a time series, which is the actual history for the demand for each product. And then a moving average. We've got 3 different forecasts looking out in the future from the beginning of May onwards. Forecast A, B, and C. So we'll take a little look at the differences between the two in terms of what they're showing us. And then Nicolas is going to take back the baton and talk about some of the concept behind those. And then we'll round back to the tool and show you what method was used to generate which forecast. So the main outputs here, we have time series forecast, where you can see the historical forecast or just the future forecast. So there's 2 reports for that. And then we have the forecast accuracy, which is looking at how accurate each of those forecasts is for each of the products. You'll see that there is a range of accuracy across the different products, and there's a range of accuracy for the forecast method for any given product. And we want to be choosing the very best, which in this case looks like forecast B. So some practical stuff on managing the tool. The tool has 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 visible spreadsheets. There's 7 visible sheets within the workbook. The menu sheet is where you want to start. This is because the data is going to come from a location. I've set this up to go from a folder on your C drive called C forecast data, PS forecasting/data. So I recommend you set it up like that, and we'll give you a zip file that will have all of the inputs in a folder like that already. So you just save it to your C drive. That's where the data are coming from. Then you hit the update button. So when you hit that update button, you'll see that the data will pop into a series of sheets. The green sheets are the query sheets, which is bringing in the table of data. The gray sheets are the calculations, and then we have the reports in yellow. And that button is going to run through them all and then generate the information on the reporting sheets. So that's the tool really in a nutshell. Here's one item, product FC 1018. You can see there's quite a lot of variability of demand going up and down. There's actually a lot more demand in the tool. This is sort of filtered to show you a more recent history. And then we've got 3 different forecasts. You can probably guess what forecast A is. Some of you might be able to have a guess at what's generating forecast B. You can see they're both level, so you might call it a naive forecast, the same level out to every period in the future. And then we've got forecast C, which is representing some kind of trend. Okay, so these are 3 forecasts going from very simple forecast A out to more sophisticated into B and C, and then I'm going to hand back to Nicola. He's going to talk about some of the concept and theory that would go behind that, and we'll show you then how those definitions apply to the output of the tool. Okay, so yeah, do you want to take over the share? And
yeah, sure. Let me share the screen again. Just a second.
In the meantime, yeah, Nigel is making the point that food industry is daily buckets. Yes, I've been working on a food client this morning with daily buckets, so that's absolutely true. And you've got to pick your interval or your granularity of period that's appropriate for the business.
Okay, let me maybe discuss some of the forecasting model and see how we can build onto simple one to more complicated approach and more elaborate approaches. And I really like this one. I like to start every forecasting exercise just using a moving average to see how far a simple moving average can get us. And then any new model you would create and you would use, you would compare it to this moving average to see if you can beat that. Let me say this again, because actually the more supply chain I'm discussing with, the more I'm advising this. So let me just try to rephrase that again. If today you are the leader of a demand planning process, you are managing a demand planning process, SNOP process, anything like that, and you want to know if your team as a whole is doing a good job, if your forecast engine is doing a good job, anything like that, my #1 advice is just run a moving average, a simple, straight moving average. Compute the forecast accuracy of this moving average and compare it to your process. Compare it to your baseline forecast, your software, your homemade Excel solution, whatever it is. Compare it to that and just check that you add value compared to this moving average, that you can beat it consistently, right? If today, and I saw that some of you said, well, I don't have a forecast baseline, I'm doing all of that manually. My advice for you, you just do the average of the last 3 to 6 months and you use this as a forecast baseline. It works actually quite well. And it's not a given that everyone here in this call, in this webinar, will beat the moving average. So if you do this test of comparing yourself to moving average, it is not a given that you will beat it, okay? Now, let me just take a second to just show you how that works. So moving average in Excel, you can set it up quite easily yourself. You just say that any forecast is the average of the last 3 or 6 periods, and you just move forward with this. You would get a forecast that looks like the graph on the right side. Now, what we can see is that if you use a moving average of the last 3 periods, that would be the orange line here. You see that it fluctuates quite a lot, but it also follows quite well demand. So if demand changes, this forecast also adapts itself quite easily. Now, if you take the moving average of the last 8 or 12 months or 6 months, you're going to have something that's smoother, but does not react so fast to any change in demand. So if you have a lot of trend and seasonality, that might not be a good idea. But on the other hand, if you have relatively stable product, doing a moving average of 6 to 12 months might actually be a good idea. Now, moving average or moving average, it's not the smartest model on earth. It cannot extrapolate any trend. It doesn't take into account seasonality, but also it doesn't take into account promotion, shortages, pricing, and so on. So it's very basic. And yet, again, I can bet that not all of you will beat a moving average with your current process or model. Now, how can we do something better than moving average? Now, and this is the most technical slide of this webinar, so please stay with me for another few minutes so I can explain you the trick here. If you do a moving average and you say, well, I want to do a moving average of the last 3 periods, it's a game of information weighting. It's like saying, I'm going to give a third of importance to the last month, a third of importance to 2 months ago, and a third 3 months ago, right? So here I'm doing this moving average of the last 3 months. I'm taking a third of the month before, a third of 2 months, and a third of 3 months, right? If you had 5 moving average of the last 5 months, it would be 20% allocated to every single month, right? Again, you have to see this as a game of information, a game of information weighting, thinking how much importance, how much weight do I give to each of these months? Now, if you look at this graph, you might realize that we have 2 issues. First, if I want to make a prediction for any of your business of what's going on in next month in May, the first thing I would look at would be likely that would be the sales you had in March, the demand you had in March, not the demand you had in last year, December, because last year, December, that's further away, so it's maybe less relevant. In March, what's happening right now, this is much more important, much more relevant, right? But when you look at the moving average, it's going to give the same importance to March as the importance of December, if you do, for example, a 6-month moving average. It doesn't make much sense because we all understand that what happened right now, what happened last week or last month is more important than what happened 6 months ago, right? So we would like that this moving average puts more importance to what just happened last month. There is another trick here. We also see that, let's go back to this moving average of the last 3 months. Well, it gives this 1/3, 1/3, 1/3, and then 0. It's a bit strange that if you do this forecast for May, you give one third of importance to March, 1/3 to February, 1/3 to January, and then 0 to December. You could think that, well, okay, December is not so important, it's not so relevant, but is it important to 0%? Can't we just allocate a few percent of importance to whatever happened in December, like 5%, 3%, right? So you would say on one hand, well, March, which is the most recent data, should be more important, but we should also allocate some importance to December, maybe just 1% of importance to November and so on. And this is how you go from the concept of moving average, which is very flat, very uniform, to the concept of exponential smoothing. Let me show you. So again, 2 issues here. This one here should have more importance, and this one here should have just a small weight, some small importance. If you move to exponential smoothing, and I will not show the math, I just want to show you the concept of what's happening in terms of importance. You have a smoothing factors, it's this person here, and this determines the importance of the most recent month. And starting from there, every single month is going to receive some small weighting. So for example, with this, let's say 40% here, the last month gets 40% of importance, and then every single month after also gets some importance. So again, if you look at forecasting as a game of information, and it's actually a game of information, you see that by using exponential smoothing, you leverage information, you leverage data for the last 12 or 24 months. So your forecast is basically richer. It contains more information, which makes it basically smarter. Now, and I'm sure Kim can show you how you can use the Excel tool we will share with you to use this exponential smoothing model. I just want to show you some insights here. So exponential smoothing, first, it's very smart, but the one I just showed you still doesn't get trend and doesn't get seasonality. We will not discuss much seasonality today, but obviously you can add seasonality to simple exponential smoothing. The thing I want to show you here is the impact of choosing the smoothing factor here of 20% versus 80%. Now, if you use a smoothing factor that's rather low, like 20%, what happens is that we get the orange forecast here. It's very smooth. That's great. But on the other side, it doesn't really update itself quickly. So it's always a bit lagging behind the forecast. If you see here, the last part of the forecast here, the orange forecast, the one with 20%, it's always slightly too high. And it basically takes too much time to kind of keep up with the demand and understand that demand is kind of decreasing. Why? Because of the smoothing factor that's very low. We also look at things that happened 6 or 12 months ago, so we don't see the trend so much. Now, if you move to a smoothing factor of 80%, you're going to put a lot of importance of what's happening right now. But then the issue is that your forecast is doing a lot of up and down. So your forecast is very volatile. Your forecast is not lagging behind. That's so great. But it's very volatile, which is not that great, because then you will always have up and down in your forecast and then up and down in your planning. One of the solutions to that, to both keep up with demand and not fluctuate too much, is to include trends in your model. Again, trend here, I will not show the equation. It's a bit out of scope for this very specific webinar. But the idea is that you can really add the concept of trend into exponential smoothing. I know that some of you, when you have to deal with trend, I've seen a lot of planners looking at how much did I sell this year? How much did I sell last year? I'm just going to compute the overall difference, express it as a percentage, like plus 5%, and I'm going to add this plus 5% for my forecast next year. So it's a trend that is very, I would say, manual. It's something that based on some rule you did some computation, and you basically forced your model to have a 5% growth rate. Actually, what we propose here is to automate that and to really include in the model the concept of the trend. So the model will flag the trend itself, and the model will understand the trend product by product, assessing what's the growth rate, and then the model can take that into account. You can see this on the right side. I created two forecasts. One that's just the simple exponential smoothing, as I just showed you. You see it's the yellow one. So any future forecast is flat because the model does not understand the concept of a trend. And the other forecast, it's also exponential smoothing, but it includes a trend. The model sees a trend, the model understands the concept of a trend, and then the model can extrapolate this trend as well. Now, I think, Kien, you want to do a quick demo of the tool, right?
Yeah, so I'll bring the screen sharing back to me and get rid of this. And now, rather than PowerPoints, we're going to look at the tool itself, and then it'll be on screen if people have questions. So I'm on a pretty big screen here, so let's zoom in a little bit. And right, so here's your menu sheet. As before, we've got one file path where all of the data is going to come in. That data is in the green, so that's the query sheet. You can see that it's not in Excel, so I can delete that. And then when I refresh it, the data pops back because everything under the green headings is connected to that text file source. And then we're doing some calculations in formulas. I'm not going to worry about what the formulas are. It's just converting that demand history into the daily and then back into weekly. So it should work with a monthly or weekly series. Be aware that if you're going to feed it monthly, then the measurement, because the measurement accuracy is only at a weekly range, so it's only measuring the accuracy of the forecast for T+1. And it's not going to give you very meaningful results if you're taking monthly that has already been converted into weekly buckets, because it would be very predictable. So that's the input. I won't worry about these calculations. Let's go straight to the report. So we've got this trend pretty much for every single item. So we've got 10 items in total. The item is in the filter here, 1 through 20. You can see the different items. So for FC 1018, we've got the demand, we've got the moving average, and yes, of course, forecast A is a moving average forecast. So that's exactly the calculation that Nicolas outlined. What's the number of periods we're averaging over? Well, that is defined in the para tab. Para means parameters, and we've got a few parameters here, one of which is the moving average days. So if I was to change that to 180 days and run the tool again, then we would expect to see that line much more flat. If we changed it to 30 days, then it would be going up and down much more. We could probably do that as I'm talking, just to give you an idea of how this runs. So update from local. When I was running this before in webinar prep, it ran in 4 seconds. Now we're running a Zoom webinar. It takes a little longer than that. But yeah, there you go. You can see that now this 30-day moving average has made this more responsive to demand. Alpha, which was part of the exponential smoothing, that initial exponential smoothing, the first simple example that Nicolas went through is known as single exponential smoothing, because it's just taking a single learning parameter, and that's the alpha value there. So again, if we were to change that, I've linked that cell here, which defines alpha as now 80% in this here. So you can see that there's a formula, just a simple cell reference that's linking those together. So you can choose to set it in the parameter, or you could set it here in the report. We can update again, and we should see a difference now. You can see that there's the forecast has really changed on both the single exponential smoothing and also the double one as well, which includes the trend. So yeah, this is really a case of playing around. You know, if because you've got two different, the beta learning parameter we didn't mention, but that's the rate at which the trend is applicable. So if I crank that up as well, then you should see that the trend is going to change. It's going to go much steeper as it's taking the most recent months and projecting them upwards. So these two parameters are really going to make a big difference in the accuracy of your forecast. If we go into the measurements again, you'll see that actually, surprisingly, you might think the most accurate one is not the one that's the most sophisticated, right? So here, the yellow or the orange one is the single exponential smoothing. For every single product, it comfortably beats the moving average for exactly those reasons that Nicolas outlined. It's taking the more recent periods as being more weight, and therefore is going to be more relevant to measuring that forecast in the short range. The blue here is the double exponential smoothing, which is taking the trend into account as well. And that actually performs a bit worse than the single using the parameters that I've put in. Those parameters haven't been optimized, so there's an opportunity to play around and see the different results that you can get. But it's fair to say that if you look back at the chart, we can see maybe why that trend is not necessarily going to give you better results in this data set with those settings, because it's probably overshooting a lot of the demand if this trend here is periodic, going up and down rather than just a continually upwards trend. So there are a number of techniques that Nicolas will be able to teach that relate to optimizing those parameters, so you don't have to do the trial and error through lots of different values to come up with the right result. And we haven't built the optimization into the simple tool. We just wanted to share something that is able to be used and start to get some results without having to do a lot of configuring. So I can start to pick up a few of the questions. I'll start with some of the ones I've seen that relate to the tool, and then maybe we can hand over and Nicola can get some of the questions that relate more to method and process. So anonymous attendee said, can you send a daily and weekly demand formula? Depends a lot on what you want that formula to do. The formulas that I've used are all included. I've not locked anything away. So if you go into row 8 of any of these calculation sheets, you'll see the formulas, and then they're just copy pasted automatically down along the data. So yeah, we won't get into the detail of the formula, but you're welcome to have a look and see how I've built this particular tool. Michael is asking, if the database pulls only daily transactional data, would you need to do your own calculations to turn it into weekly sales? I believe, now I haven't tested this because this was intended to take weekly or monthly. I believe if you fed daily into it, it should be okay. Maybe what I'll do is I'll check that after the webinar, and just when I send out the link, I'll let you know. But the other way of doing it, of course, is this tool is has a number of templates to be able to take data and process it. So it could be quite straightforward to summarize that in a pivot table, to add the week. We represent a week using the Monday of the week. So you've got a date that represents a week, and then just summarize it accordingly. In fact, you'll see in the daily, we've got 10,900 records which go daily. These are all dates consecutively, 23rd, 24th, 25th of April. And then the weekly one summarizes that in a pivot table. So it just sums up the date. So you could use something similar to feed in a daily and process the daily to weekly within the tool. So that would be one way of doing it. Right, so yeah, here's a question on new products, and I think Byron has answered similar to Super Session, but Nicola, you have any thoughts on forecasting for new product introduction?
Yeah, actually I do, and it was kind of an interesting question. So I noted down on my notebook right here that I should do a webinar and article just on this subject. Well, you have different tools at hand to forecast this. One of them being, do you have similar article in the past, or is this new product the successor of an older product? If not, if it's something that's absolutely brand new, if you are a supply chain with a lot of brand new product, we might be able to do a model just to do that. It's rather complicated, but I worked with some one of the most famous retail company on working on that. Otherwise, I would say it's much easier to do judgmental forecasting, asking demand planners to do that rather than using a model. Maybe before we move on to answering this question, I have still a few slides to share. I will take back the screen for a sec and share this last slide if that's fine for you, and then we can continue the discussion on these questions. So one of the things that also we wanted to announce on this webinar with Kien was the fact that we are organizing a massive live training in June. We will cover all best practices, tips and tricks on how to set up your demand planning process. We will also discuss how to create your own model in Excel. As you've seen, we will already share with you a model in Excel, and we will, during the training, show you how you can use this model, but also how you can create more advanced model yourself. One of the things that I'm really looking forward to sharing with you is how you can optimize all these parameters using a huge array of very advanced techniques and smart things to be sure that these parameters are very well optimized for your very specific supply chain. And that's, I think, very important when you do demand forecasting, to be sure that the forecast you have answers the question your supply chain needs to answer the need of your supply chain, being what kind of decision my supply chain is taking. And then I want my forecast to be optimized to do that. Okay, that's some of the things we discussed in the first webinar. So during this training, we will do 8 sessions of 2 hours. On top of that, we will do some videos for you for these Excel files, so you can basically practice on your own. We will do Q&A session, so we can answer all these things. Something else that's very important to know, we will only get 12 people maximum in this training session to be sure that we can interact with everyone. We will obviously use WooClap, as you know it, to ask all the questions, to be sure that everyone participate. So if you're interested to join, just you or your team, check this link as soon as you can and register as soon as you can, because we will close it as of when we have 12 people. Maybe, Kien, would you mind sharing the link directly in the chat group so everyone can click on it?
Yes.
Perfect. Of course, if you have any very detailed question on that, you want to have the very detailed list of content, or you want to know if we're going to discuss some very specific point, don't hesitate to just send us an email and we will answer, and we will share all the detail with you. We also have more detail online on this address. And I think it's a very cool address, as I said to Kien, this xlsm.co. It's kind of very, very impressive. So to finish this webinar, before we tackle your question, I have one last question for you on WooClap. I'm going to put it live now, and I like always to ask the same question. What's your next steps? So we have been discussing forecast baseline. We have been discussing predictive analytics, statistical forecast, trend, no trend. We have been discussing model in Excel. You will receive the model. We will share the model with anyone who register in this webinar. You will have it for free. As Kien told you, you can play around with the formula to see how it works and maybe adapt it to your own supply chain. I think it's great that we all take the time to think, but what's my next step to improve my demand planning activities? Obviously, we would love to see you in the training we are setting up. Let's maybe take a minute to reply to this. I think I've seen a very interesting question in the discussion. I'll just take another look to answer this one because it was so
in the
great.
meantime, I can pick up a few of the easy ones. Yes, sure. We're going to be recording. We are recording this. The recording will be sent out to everybody after the webinar, so you'll be able to see a replay. The same email will send you a link to the tool, so we will be sharing this tool right after the webinar. So later on, in a couple of hours, you'll get an email from us that'll give you those two things. How to forecast multiple SKUs? Well, the tool is designed to forecast, to take demand and to forecast at the SKU level. So we've got 10 SKUs, 2.5 years of demand. You could probably scale that up to 100 pretty easily with the same amount of data, even more if you had fewer time intervals. So yeah, that is set up for you to be able to do automated forecasting across all of your SKUs. How can we get this tool? So yes, we have shared that. Does it include seasonality parameters or other promotions? And we'll show the spike. No, it does not. So this tool has single exponential smoothing, which is just the historical trend, taking the more recent periods as higher weighting. It has double exponential smoothing, which is applying some kind of trend, but it doesn't go the full extent to seasonal patterns. And that is something that we will cover in detail within the training. Getting the model to do that and getting it set up right so it's going to give you sensible results takes a lot more than just pushing the button on a simple example. So we would have to do a good amount of background to get that running, but it will be included within the scope of the training.
So maybe as you read some other question, I have one or two that are very interesting. We still have 3 minutes, so I'm going to try to do as fast as I can. So some of you are asking how to tackle promotion. Should I clean them? Should I let the tool do it? Some of you are asking, but can I really forecast demand as I had shortages in the past and then I see just sales of 0? The answer to both is nearly the same. If you have a lot of shortages, if you have a lot of promotion, you need to be sure that your model understands shortages, so you do not need to clean that, and that your model understands promotion, so you do not need to clean that because your model understands what's a promotion and what is not a promotion. Again, the more I discuss with supply chain, the more I'm absolutely certain that you need a very strong forecast baseline that understands the most important thing for your supply chain. Some of you might not do any promotion. That's fine. Your model doesn't need to do it. If you do a lot of promotion, your tool needs to do that. A lot of you also ask, can we take into account seasonality? Sure, we can do that. The model that we create can definitely do that in Excel. And again, the answer is the same. If you face a lot of seasonality, you need to use seasonal model. It makes no sense that you ask your team of human every month to clean shortages, to clean promotion, to clean seasonality, whereas actually we could just include that in the tool right away, so you don't need to do that and you can automate everything. I think this question of shortage is so important and so interesting. I'm for sure going to do a webinar about it in the future. But I think that was the last question I wanted to answer. Kien, I don't know if you would like to discuss something else.
Yeah, so I think, I mean, there is a technical question there on stats, but that's probably best answered directly. We will go back through, and if there's anything that really hasn't been covered, I don't mind sending out a quick email to with some thoughts around that. So yeah, I think we want to finish on time on this one. So we're going to come to an end of the webinar. Thanks very much for everybody taking the time out. I know there's a lot of content out there for you to visit, so we really do appreciate you taking an hour of your busy day to come and spend.
And we also hope that you're going to have a lot of fun with the tool we will share with everyone. Huh?
Yeah, and give us some feedback, right? It's really helpful. Let us know how you get on. When you've fed your demand data into it, you're getting something out, it's starting to give you some results. Let us know how it's going. We'd be really keen to help. And if you do, I would be keen to do another webinar on the similar topic. So let us know what you want to hear, and we can arrange something where we get more time to deep dive.
Perfect. It was a pleasure to co-host these two webinars with you, Kien. I hope everyone enjoyed. I hope everyone got good ideas and next steps out of that. I saw a lot of questions. I'm sorry we didn't have the time to answer everything. You have both our email address, and I hope to see 12 of you to our training session in June.
Yes, thanks very much, everyone, again, and we look forward to seeing you on another webinar or in the training session.
Have a great day.
Thank
Ciao.
you. Bye.